Imagine this. It's dawn in ancient India. The air is still cool from the night as the first rays of sunlight filter through the mist. A young seeker sits at the feet of his guru near the banks of the Ganges. The water flows endlessly, just as it has for thousands of years, carrying stories, washing away impurities, never stopping, never changing its nature. The young man has traveled for months to ask one question. "Master," he says, "I have studied the texts, I have fasted, I have meditated, but still I feel empty inside. What am I missing?" The old sage smiles. He points to the river and says, "What do you see?" The student replies, "I see water flowing." The master nods. "And what happens to the water as it flows?" "It changes form," says the student, "sometimes calm, sometimes turbulent, but it's always water." The master's eyes light up. "Now look at your reflection in the water. What do you see?" The student peers into the rippling surface. "I see myself, but distorted by the movement of the water." The master places his hand on the young man's shoulder. "That distortion is why you suffer. You see yourself as separate from the flow of existence, but you are both the observer and the observed, the water and the reflection. When you truly understand this, everything changes. This teaching, this realization that has guided seekers for millennia, has now found you. Not by chance, not by coincidence, but because you're ready to hear it. Something inside you knows that there's more to life than what you've been told, that beneath the surface of everyday existence lies a deeper truth waiting to be uncovered. I'm going to tell you something that might shock you. The world you're experiencing right now, the reality you believe is solid and unchangeable, is actually a projection of your consciousness. This isn't some new age fantasy. This is the conclusion that ancient wisdom traditions across the world have independently arrived at. From the Vedic seers of India to the mystics of Sufism, from the Kabbalists to the Taoists of ancient China, all point to the same fundamental truth, a truth that modern quantum physics is only beginning to verify. You are not who you think you are. You are not your body. You are not your thoughts. You are not your emotions. These are merely expressions, temporary manifestations of something far more profound. The great secret that has been whispered through the ages is that you are consciousness itself, pure awareness experiencing itself in countless forms and expressions. But this realization has been systematically hidden from you, buried under layers of conditioning, social programming, and the hypnotic trance of everyday life. You've been taught to identify with a limited sense of self, to believe that you are separate from everything else, isolated in your own skin. This identification with limitation is the root cause of all suffering, all feelings of inadequacy, all fear. Think about it for a moment. From the day you were born, you've been given a name, a gender, a nationality, a religion, a social class. You've been told what to believe, how to behave, what success looks like, what failure means. And you accepted all of this without question because everyone around you did the same. But what if I told you that all of these identities are merely labels, useful fictions perhaps, but not the truth of who you really are? The ancient Upanishads express this in the Mahavakya, the great saying, Tat Tavam Asi, that thou art. You are not separate from the source of all being. You are it, expressing itself in human form. The Buddha called this realization anatta, no self. The recognition that what we take to be a solid, permanent self is actually a process, a flow, a dance of energies in constant flux. But don't just take my word for it. Look at your own experience. Right now, in this moment, can you find a separate self anywhere? Look carefully. You'll find sensations, thoughts, perceptions, feelings. But where is the one who claims to own these experiences? The more closely you look, the more this separate self dissolves into pure awareness, into the space in which all experiences arise and pass away. This is what the great Advaita master Ramana Maharshi meant when he instructed his disciples to constantly inquire, "Who am I?" Not to arrive at a conceptual answer, but to exhaust the mind's attempts to define itself until only awareness remains. Now you may be wondering, if this is true, why don't I already know this? Why do I still feel limited, separate, vulnerable? The answer is simple but profound. You've forgotten. You've been caught in what the Hindus call Maya, the cosmic illusion, the dream of separation. You've mistaken the costume for the actor, the wave for the ocean, the ray of light for the sun itself. And you're not alone. Humanity as a whole has been living in collective amnesia forgetting our true nature, caught in patterns of fear, greed, competition, and conflict that arise from the illusion of separation. Look around at the state of our world. The environmental destruction, the social injustice, the endless wars, the epidemic of loneliness and depression. All of these are symptoms of a species that has forgotten its connection to the whole. But something is stirring. A great awakening is underway. More and more people are beginning to question the old narratives, to see through the illusion, to remember who they really are. And if you're watching this right now, you're part of this awakening. The ancient sages knew that cycles of forgetting and remembering are built into the very fabric of existence. The Hindus speak of the yugas, vast cycles of time in which consciousness moves from unity to multiplicity and back again. According to many traditions, we are now at the end of Kali Yuga, the age of darkness and division, and entering a new cycle of expanded awareness and reconnection with the whole. But this shift isn't automatic. It requires your conscious participation. It asks you to wake up from the dream of separation, to remember who you truly are, and to live from that recognition. And this is where the practical wisdom of the sages becomes invaluable. So let me ask you a question. How much of your life do you spend lost in thought, rehashing the past, worrying about the future, barely noticing the present moment as it unfolds? If you're like most people, the answer is probably most of your waking hours. Your mind is constantly chattering, commenting, judging, comparing, calculating, and you've come to believe that this stream of mental activity is who you are. But the sages tell us something different. They say that you are not the content of consciousness, but consciousness itself. You are not the thoughts, but the awareness in which thoughts arise. You are not the feelings, but the open space in which feelings come and go. You are not the sensations, but the knowing presence that registers sensations. This distinction is crucial. As long as you identify with the contents of consciousness, with the ever-changing flow of thoughts, feelings, and sensations, you remain caught in suffering, because all these phenomena are impermanent. They arise and pass away. If you pin your identity to something transient, you set yourself up for disappointment and loss. But when you recognize yourself as consciousness itself, as the unchanging awareness that witnesses all experience, you discover a freedom and peace that cannot be disturbed by the ups and downs of life. This is what the Buddha meant by nirvana, what the Upanishads call moksha, what the Sufis refer to as fana, the extinction of the separate self in the ocean of being. Now, this may all sound very abstract and philosophical, but the sages weren't interested in philosophy for its own sake. They were practical psychologists, experts in the art of human flourishing. They developed precise methods for shifting identification from the limited ego self to boundless awareness. And these methods work. They've been tested and refined over thousands of years across diverse cultures and contexts. The first step is learning to be present, to bring your attention fully into the now, into this moment, which is the only moment that ever exists. The past is just memory. The future is imagination. Only the present is real. And it's only in the present that you can recognize your true nature. Try this simple practice right now. Wherever you are, whatever you're doing, just pause. Take a deep breath. Feel the sensations in your body. Listen to the sounds around you. Notice the thoughts passing through your mind. Don't try to change anything, just be aware. This simple act of presence already begins to shift your identification from the content of experience to the awareness of experience. The great Zen master Thich Nhat Hanh taught this practice of present moment awareness through the simple act of mindful breathing. When you bring your full attention to the breath, you step out of the stream of thinking and into direct experience. The breath becomes an anchor, a bridge between the world of concepts and the reality of now. But being present is just the beginning. The next step is to investigate the nature of this presence. Who or what is aware of the present moment? Who is breathing? Who is listening? Who is feeling? If you look closely, you'll find that the answer can't be put into words. It's not a thing, not an object, not something that can be grasped by thought. What you discover is a vast, open awareness, boundless as the sky, in which all experiences arise, exist for a time, and then dissolve back into emptiness. This awareness has no boundaries, no beginning, no end. It's not personal, not limited to your body or mind. It's universal consciousness, expressing itself uniquely through your particular form, just as the same ocean expresses itself in countless different waves. This recognition doesn't happen once and for all. It comes in glimpses at first, moments of clarity that punctuate our usual state of identification with thoughts and feelings. But with practice, these glimpses become more frequent, more sustained, until they become your default state of being. The ancient Zen masters described this process as first there is a mountain, then there is no mountain, then there is a mountain. First, you see the world through the lens of conventional reality, with separate objects and beings. Then, through spiritual practice, you have insights into the empty, interconnected nature of all things. Finally, you return to conventional reality, but now seeing it as a play of consciousness, a dance of emptiness and form. But let me be clear about something. This awakening I'm describing isn't about escaping from the world. It's not about renouncing life or hiding in a cave. On the contrary, it's about engaging with life more fully, more authentically, from a place of greater freedom and compassion. When you recognize yourself as boundless awareness rather than a separate self, you naturally feel connected to all beings. You see that your well-being and the well-being of others are not separate. You can't harm another without harming yourself, because at the deepest level, there is no other. This is the basis of ethics in all wisdom traditions, not as rules imposed from outside, but as the natural expression of recognized unity. The great Indian saint Ramakrishna demonstrated this truth in a dramatic way. One day, he was sitting by the Ganges when he saw boatmen rowing across the river. They were arguing and fighting with each other. Suddenly, Ramakrishna cried out in pain. When his disciples asked what was wrong, he showed them his back, which was covered with welts and bruises. He explained that when he saw the boatmen beating each other, he felt their pain in his own body, because he no longer experienced any separation between himself and others. This level of empathic connection may seem extraordinary, but it's actually our natural state when the barriers of the separate self are removed. And it doesn't require decades of meditation or ascetic practices. It can happen in an instant, through grace, through suffering that breaks open the heart, through profound love, or through direct transmission from someone who already embodies this truth. There's a beautiful story about the Buddha that illustrates this. After his enlightenment, he simply held up a flower and smiled. Only one disciple, Mahakasyapa, understood and smiled back. In that wordless exchange, the truth was transmitted, a truth beyond words, beyond concepts, the direct recognition of our true nature. This direct transmission continues to this day. It's available to anyone who is open to receive it. Sometimes it happens through a teacher, sometimes through nature, sometimes through a crisis that strips away our usual defenses and leaves us naked to reality. However it comes, this recognition changes everything. When you know yourself as boundless awareness rather than a separate self, fear begins to dissolve. Not because you've become invulnerable, but because you recognize that what you truly are cannot be threatened. Your body can be harmed, your possessions can be taken, your reputation can be ruined, but awareness itself remains untouched, like the sky that remains open and clear, regardless of the weather passing through it. This doesn't mean you become indifferent to the welfare of your body and mind. On the contrary, you care for them with greater wisdom and compassion, recognizing them as precious instruments through which consciousness experiences and expresses itself in the world. But you no longer mistake them for your fundamental identity. The same applies to your relationships. When you no longer approach others from a place of lack, neediness, or fear, your connections become more authentic, more joyful, more fulfilling. You're able to truly see others, to listen to them, to appreciate their unique expression of the same consciousness that you are. Love flows naturally when the barriers of the separate self are removed. Even your work in the world is transformed. Instead of being driven by egoic ambition, by the need to prove yourself or acquire status and security, you act from inspiration, from a sense of purpose that arises naturally when you're aligned with your true nature. Your actions become less about getting and more about giving, less about achievement and more about service. The great sages all embodied this truth in their lives. The Buddha walked the dusty roads of northern India for 45 years after his enlightenment, teaching and serving others. Jesus healed the sick and fed the hungry, demonstrating love in action. Ramana Maharshi welcomed seekers from all walks of life, radiating silent blessing from his hermitage at the foot of Arunachala mountain. But you don't need to be a great sage to live from this truth. You only need to be willing to question your assumptions, to look beyond appearances, to remember what you've always known at the deepest level of your being. The truth is not hidden. It's right here, in plain sight, closer than your own breath. Every tradition has its methods for removing the veils that obscure this recognition. In Buddhism, it's mindfulness and insight meditation. In Advaita Vedanta, it's self-inquiry. In Christianity, it's contemplative prayer. In Sufism, it's remembrance of the divine. These practices differ in form but share the same essential purpose: to shift identification from the separate self to boundless awareness. But there's also a simpler, more direct approach, one that doesn't require any special techniques or formal practices. It's simply the willingness to be present, to meet each moment with open awareness, to question your assumptions, to see through the stories that maintain the illusion of separation. Ask yourself right now, what am I aware of? Thoughts, feelings, sensations, perceptions. Now ask, who or what is aware of all this? Don't answer conceptually. Don't repeat what you've heard or read. Look directly. What is the nature of this awareness? Is it a thing among other things? Does it have boundaries? Does it come and go? Or is it the unchanging context in which all things appear and disappear? This direct looking is the essence of meditation. Not something you do for 20 minutes a day, but a way of being that permeates your life. It's the art of living in alignment with your true nature, moment by moment, day by day. Of course, there will be challenges along the way. The momentum of old habits is strong. The pull of identification with thoughts and feelings is powerful. The cultural conditioning that reinforces the illusion of separation is pervasive. But with patience, perseverance, and compassion for yourself when you forget, the new way of being gradually becomes established. One of the most common obstacles on this path is the spiritual ego, the subtle way in which the separate self co-opts spiritual language and experiences to maintain and even enhance itself. You may find yourself thinking, I'm more awake than other people, or I've had profound experiences that make me special. Whenever you notice this happening, it's a sign that identification has shifted back to the separate self. The truly awakened being doesn't feel special or superior. On the contrary, they recognize themselves in everyone and everything. They see that the same consciousness that looks out through their eyes looks out through the eyes of every other being. This recognition naturally gives rise to humility, to a sense of kinship with all life. Another challenge is the integration of this recognition into daily life. It's relatively easy to experience non-dual awareness in meditation or in nature, or in the presence of a teacher who embodies this truth. It's much harder to maintain it when you're stuck in traffic, or dealing with a difficult colleague, or facing illness or loss. This is where practice becomes essential, not as a means to achieve some future state, but as the ongoing embodiment of what you already know to be true. Each time you catch yourself lost in reactivity, in judgment, in identification with the separate self, you have the opportunity to pause, to remember, to return to the recognition of your true nature. The great Tibetan master Dudjom Rinpoche used to say, "The nature of mind is like the sky, and our thoughts and emotions are like clouds. No matter how dark or stormy the clouds, they never affect the sky itself." In the same way, no matter how intense or challenging your experiences, the open awareness that you are remains untouched, spacious, clear. This perspective doesn't eliminate challenges, but it transforms your relationship to them. Instead of being threats to be avoided or problems to be solved, difficulties become opportunities for deepening your recognition, for bringing unconscious patterns into the light of awareness, for growing in wisdom and compassion. Even physical pain can be approached in this way. Instead of contracting around pain, resisting it, fighting it, you can meet it with open awareness, curious about its nature, its qualities, its changes. Many people have discovered that when pain is met in this way, without the added suffering of resistance and fear, it becomes more tolerable, sometimes even dissolving into pure energy or sensation. The same applies to emotional pain, to grief, anger, fear, loneliness. When these emotions are met with awareness rather than resistance, when they're allowed to move through you without being suppressed or acted out, they become doorways to greater presence, greater compassion, greater freedom. This is the alchemy that the ancient sages mastered, the transformation of lead into gold, of suffering into wisdom. not by escaping from difficult experiences, but by fully meeting them from a place of open awareness, recognizing that even the most challenging states are temporary expressions of the same consciousness that you are. As you continue on this path of awakening, you may notice certain signs that your consciousness is indeed shifting. You might find yourself less reactive, more responsive. You might notice a growing sense of spaciousness around your thoughts and feelings, a capacity to witness them without being completely identified with them. You might experience more moments of spontaneous joy, of gratitude, of connection with others and with the natural world. You might also notice certain synchronicities, meaningful coincidences that seem to guide you toward the next step on your path. Perhaps you meet just the right person at just the right time. Or a book falls open to exactly the passage you needed to read, or an unexpected opportunity arises that perfectly aligns with your deepest values and aspirations. These synchronicities aren't magical thinking or mere coincidence. They're natural expressions of a consciousness that's becoming more coherent, more aligned with the intelligence of the whole. As the boundaries of the separate self become more permeable, you naturally flow more in harmony with the larger currents of life. This doesn't mean that everything becomes easy or that you get everything you want. The awakened life isn't about fulfilling the desires of the separate self. It's about allowing yourself to be lived by the whole, to be an instrument of consciousness expressing itself through your unique form. Sometimes this means saying yes to opportunities that the separate self might reject out of fear or doubt. Sometimes it means saying no to paths that the ego might find tempting, but that don't align with your deepest truth. The key is discernment, listening to the still, small voice of wisdom that speaks through intuition rather than being driven by conditioning, by should and musts, by the expectations of others. The Buddhist tradition speaks of bodhicitta, the awakened heart-mind that spontaneously works for the benefit of all beings. This isn't a moral imperative imposed from outside, but the natural expression of recognized unity. When you know that all beings are expressions of the same consciousness that you are, compassion flows without effort. This compassion isn't limited to humans. It extends to all sentient beings, to the entire web of life. The more deeply you recognize your true nature, the more you feel your connection to the earth itself, to the rivers and oceans, to the air you breathe, to the intricate systems that sustain all life. This recognition naturally gives rise to a more sustainable, regenerative way of living. The great Indian sage Nisargadatta Maharaj expressed this beautifully when he said, "Wisdom is knowing I am nothing. Love is knowing I am everything. And between the two, my life moves." This is the dance of awakening, the oscillation between the recognition of your essential emptiness, your non-existence as a separate entity, and your complete fullness, your existence as the totality of consciousness expressing itself as everything. As this recognition deepens, your life begins to align more and more with the whole. You find yourself in the right place at the right time, doing what needs to be done, saying what needs to be said, often without planning or deliberation. This is what the Taoists call Wu Wei, action without forcing, effort without struggle, the natural unfolding of life through you when you're no longer obstructing it with the agenda of the separate self. You might wonder, what happens to my personality, my uniqueness, my individuality in this process? Do I become some kind of blank slate, indistinguishable from everyone else? Not at all. Just as each wave on the ocean has its unique shape, size, and movement, while still being made of the same water, your individual expression remains unique even as you recognize your essential unity with all that is. In fact, paradoxically, the more you recognize yourself as universal consciousness, the more your unique gifts and qualities can express themselves freely, unconstrained by the fears and inhibitions of the separate self. Your actions become more spontaneous, more authentic, more aligned with your deepest values and natural talents. The great Zen master Shunryu Suzuki put it this way: to be yourself is to forget yourself. When you're no longer preoccupied with self-image, with how you appear to others, with protecting and promoting a particular identity, your natural qualities shine forth effortlessly. You might also wonder about the practical implications of this shift in consciousness. Does it mean withdrawing from the world, becoming passive, accepting everything as it is? Again, not at all. The recognition of non-duality doesn't negate the relative world of form and action. It simply infuses your engagement with the world with greater wisdom, compassion, and effectiveness. The awakened being isn't passive in the face of suffering or injustice. On the contrary, they act decisively, but without the distorting lens of ego, without the reactivity of anger or fear, without attachment to particular outcomes. Their action arises from clear seeing, from compassion, from an understanding of interdependence that recognizes that harm to any part of the whole is harm to the whole itself. This is the path of the Bodhisattva in Buddhism, the spiritually awakened being who commits to working for the liberation of all beings. It's the path of karma yoga in Hinduism, selfless action performed as an offering to the divine. It's the path of service embodied by saints and sages in all traditions, and it's available to you right now, not as some distant ideal, but as the natural expression of your true nature once the veils of ignorance and separation begin to lift. The more you live from this recognition, the more your life becomes a blessing to all you touch, not through conscious effort or striving, but through the simple radiation of your being. As you come to the end of this message, you might be wondering, what's the next step? How do I deepen this recognition? How do I more fully embody this truth in my daily life? The answer is both simple and profound. Keep questioning your assumptions about who you are. Keep looking beyond appearances to the reality they point to. Keep returning again and again to the direct experience of being, to the awareness that is reading these words right now. Don't turn this into another project for the separate self, another achievement to strive for. That would miss the whole point. Instead, relax into the recognition that's already here, the knowing presence that you already are. Let that recognition inform your choices, your relationships, your work in the world. Find support for this journey. Connect with others who share this understanding, who can reflect it back to you when you forget. Read the words of the great sages, not as dogma to be believed, but as pointers directing you back to your own direct experience. Establish a regular practice, whatever form resonates with you, that creates the space for this recognition to deepen and stabilize. And be patient with yourself. The habit of identification with the separate self is strong, reinforced by thousands of years of collective conditioning. It doesn't dissolve overnight. There will be times when you forget, when you get caught in old patterns of thinking and reacting. When this happens, don't judge yourself harshly. Simply notice, smile at the mind's old habits, and gently return to the recognition of your true nature. Remember the words of the great Sufi poet Rumi, "Come, come, whoever you are. Wanderer, worshipper, lover of leaving. It doesn't matter. Ours is not a caravan of despair. Come, even if you have broken your vows 1,000 times. Come yet again. Come, come." This invitation is always open. The door to awakening is never closed. Each moment offers a fresh opportunity to remember, to return, to recognize what you've always been. And know that you're not alone on this journey. The same recognition is dawning in hearts and minds around the world, creating a field of awakened consciousness that supports and strengthens your own awakening. Every time you remember your true nature, you contribute to this field, making it easier for others to remember too. This is how transformation happens, not through force or struggle, but through the quiet revolution of awakened consciousness, spreading person by person, heart by heart, until it reaches critical mass. And you are part of this revolution simply by being open to this message, by questioning your assumptions, by glimpsing, even for a moment, the boundless awareness that you truly are. The secret of the great sages is no longer hidden. It's being spoken openly, received by those who are ready to hear it, embodied by those who recognize its truth. And if this message has found you, it's because you're ready to take the next step on this journey of awakening, this journey of remembering what you've never actually forgotten, of becoming what you've always already been. So I invite you, right now, to take a deep breath. Feel the aliveness in your body. Notice the awareness in which these sensations, these thoughts, these words are appearing. Rest in that awareness, even for a moment. And know that this simple recognition, repeated and deepened over time, has the power to transform not only your life, but the world itself. The journey of 1,000 miles begins with a single step. And that step is happening right now, in this very moment of recognition. Trust it, follow it, let it guide you home to yourself, to the truth that has always been here, waiting patiently for you to remember. Your life is about to change forever, not because something new is being added, but because the veils that have hidden your true nature are beginning to dissolve. And what remains when those veils lift is more beautiful, more peaceful, more alive than anything you could have imagined. It is nothing less than your own true face, the face you had before you were born, the boundless awareness that has been looking through your eyes all along. Welcome home. The journey has just begun.